To another episode of ASAP, your Afrikan Social Activism Playbook. I am one of your hosts, T. Jamal, joined as always by my lovely sister, Michelee. How you doing today?
Hey, brother, I'm doing very well today. I just got back a little while ago from the museum. So during COVID, hold on, I think I'm getting. Are you getting a little echo? I think I'm getting a little echo. But during this whole pandemic and everything, I've been really taking it upon myself to explore where I live and just get out, get some fresh air.
Yeah, museums are an interesting, touchy topic for me.
Yeah.
What type of exhibits do they have in the museums in the Middle East?
Well, this one was the National Museum of Qatar. Oh, this is
Mhm.
actually um so it was talking about like their culture, just different things that they have, in the country, like things you can find, fossils that they found and everything. So it was cool. I'm a big kid. I like seeing stuff like that.
So it was like just their personal, or not personal, but the intimate museum of their culture, not
Mhm.
because
It wasn't
museums in
artifacts from
Europe.
other people. I know. Yeah, no, it wasn't like a conquest thing,
Yeah,
just showing how they conquered everybody. No, it wasn't anything like that. It was really showing, just showcasing the history and their culture and things like that. So
I'm
I
not
thought it was pretty
sure
cool.
if did you take that art class, like we had to take that art class
Yeah.
in African American studies, but it
Mhm.
was a lot of us in the same class. I wasn't sure if you were in that class with us, where we had this white art teacher, and like she was teaching us about African art,
Mhm.
and she had like a PhD in African art.
Mhm.
And every time they spoke about the museums and the different masks that were in the museum in London and the different museums around the just in France and even the US, there has a lot of just artifacts from Africa from that they had stolen, and
Right.
they have the nerve to put it on display and make people pay for it. It was just always disturbing. I remember like having some words during class about how I felt about, these people. And some of them are mostly liberal white people who go out of their way to study, African artifacts and certain things. And it's like, okay, all of that comes from a place of privilege, and it's exploitive. So
Right.
it's just so interesting how those things come up, because that's something that came up in conversation when I was talking about reparations.
Mhm.
And we always talk about reparations from the context of the United States or those who were enslaved getting it, but not really thinking about all the things that were not only just the people were taken out of Africa, all of the actual materials and knowledge and just so much had been sucked out of the continent, and
Right.
even people were put on display. We all know about the Hottentot Venus, and those types of things just disturb me, like the concept
Right.
of certain art museums. But just going on to your point while we're doing the check-in, I've been trying to create personal time for my wife and I, just to spend time together during this pandemic. We've been like we rode around one Sunday and all we did was look at parks. We went
Oh,
to one park, but we rode around the city just to look at potential destinations of like simple dates and
right,
just to be able to be out in nature. Nobody was in the parks. They were mostly empty, and it wasn't like the big parks like a Piedmont or like a Grant Park. We went and saw those as well, but like there are like so many different small community parks. The West End has like 5 parks in that area.
right. I used to live
Right
right
around where I live, have a lot of parks. So it's it's good to get out of your monotony and see the world, and it really does kind of give you more energy. So I'm
hmm
happy to hear that you're doing the same.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite things. I love just exploring, and it's different, because I'm not from here. And I like we have gone around, like taking a road trip and going around the whole country, which takes almost no time. Really, in a few hours, like you can see everything. So I love stuff. We've done like beach camping and all kind of outdoor activities. That's me. I love it.
Yeah, we're about to go horseback riding on Sunday, and we're gonna go like at least 2 weeks per month. So something fun, but also learning to do something, also preparing
Right.
for the end of the world. If
Right.
cars aren't there, I want to know how to ride a horse.
Right.
Like,
Necessary things to know.
exactly. So, yeah, just out of the box stuff. I'm thinking about doing some things that black people don't usually do, like skydiving,
Right.
um, bungee jumping. So,
hmm
yeah, that is cool. But I want to go back into a little bit about our conversation from yesterday when we were talking about, the straight truth, no chaser of condone versus condemn, and bringing it to a broader context where yesterday we focused a lot solely on the US context of it and how, we want to not condone misbehavior, but we don't want to condemn the people. And
Right.
so that same concept can be taken into the diaspora. So when we look at Africa, for example, and we spoke a little bit about what's happening right now in Zimbabwe, right? And how the president is offering up money that the country doesn't have to pay somewhat of a reparations to people who colonized the land.
Right.
And we definitely won't condone this type of behavior, but we also run the risk of condemning all African leaders or condemning ourselves to the point where we feel like we're unfit to rule. And it
Mm.
and sometimes it's like anytime we speak of like Caribbean or any type of black led nation where we are like the political figures and those people in authority, we criticize it to a point where it almost makes us look like we are unfit to rule ourselves.
Right.
So we have to find the balance of, okay, we want to critique it to a point where we are moving in a direction that is actually helpful to the people, but we don't want people on the outside looking in saying, oh, every time that, there are black people ruling themselves, they are failing. So
Exactly.
that's tricky because it's not like these things developed overnight. It's not like these issues aren't persistent. Like we know that the Seifa that is used in Senegal, used in Mali, used in Benin, used in Cameroon, and so many other francophone speaking African countries, that it's printed in France. France gets a percentage off of the worth of the money, but the money has no value in France.
Right.
Right. And even when you look at like the budgets of some of these nations, they France holds a lot of the value of the money and doesn't even release all of the all of the currency into the nation at one time. They
Mm.
control the distribution of the currency. So, on paper, these are sovereign nations. On paper, they're independent, but
Right.
in actuality, in the actions of, they still have a boss. They still report to another nation. They're still, semi-colonized. So we understand all of those elements. So we have to speak into that context to people who may not know all those things that I just said. They may not
Right.
know that a lot of things are still controlled by Europe that's going on to so-called independent nations in Africa, and even, extending to the Caribbean, like Haiti and Jamaica and Martinique and other places like that, where you see a black face, but behind the scenes, there's still rule from other places that's kind of capping even the authority of the so-called president, prime minister, or whatever type of political system that they have set up in those countries.
Right.
So I want to make sure that when we have these conversations, we're not condoning, misbehavior and dictatorships and, being ill treatment for your citizens, but
Mhm.
also understanding that, a lot of these countries are still being exploited. And I
Mhm.
want to talk to a point where, how do we use this platform, and how do we, as people in the diaspora, African descendants, how do we fight against this so that we can actually bring some solutions?
Right.
These are just questions I have today.
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about it like what was that last week when we brought up we were having a discussion on in cars, and I was telling you how I was watching a panel discussion of young people who are currently in Nigeria, or Nigerian, but living outside of Nigeria, and they were just talking about the situation, and there were people in that conversation who were saying we need to stop saying that our government is corrupt, or that Nigerians are just corrupt, because this is a whole different message that's being spread, and people from the outside, even if you don't understand the systems, everybody is hearing that. And so, just like you said, it makes it looks like we're incapable of ruling ourselves, like when it's you don't see an enemy or something that's like outside of yourself. They look like you. The people who are oppressing you, who are leading you, they look like you. So who can you say is against you? You can't say like, oh, it's racism, oh, it's something like that. When they look like you, they're from where you're from, and like you said, there are like things that we don't see out in the front. Like we have to, dig deeper to find these things. But also, like I mentioned in that same conversation, we're still under the systems of the colonizers. We're still following, like living, like calling ourselves like the names that they've given us. From our from our perspective, like our given names, our family names, and then you have like the names of our countries, like the borders that they've outlined for us. Is like, so
The
when we do
borders.
see, yeah, when we do see African leaders who are trying to do something more like revolutionary, like I thought, from as an outsider, like looking at what Mugabe had been doing, with trying to kick them out and everything. But I'm knowing friends, being an expat, I'm meeting people who are from there, and they don't have the same opinion of him. Like they do feel like he was more like a dictator and, oppressive, looking at the state of things in the country with, dealing with poverty and all kind of stuff. I don't know, like, I don't like to just, again, paint it with a broad brush because there's so many different factors that a lot of us don't even see to understand.
That's why for me, I keep a lot of contacts in different places. And I
Mm,
didn't the first time I heard of even like the end SARS, the first time I heard about the issues that were happening near Timbuktu in northern Mali. I don't speak on anything on social media. I don't speak on anything publicly until I read different
exactly.
articles, from various sources, not just articles from the same, magazine or newspaper. I read from different articles, different, perspectives, and also talk to people who are there. Fortunately for me, I have not only contacts who are immigrants from certain countries, I have contacts that are still living in certain countries. So I can get
Right.
a firsthand, information on what's going on the ground
Mhm.
in these places. So it's just it's necessary for us to really be careful about how we speak about one another, and understand that those messages go out to everyone. It's not just
Right.
us who see them, right? We don't have a private network or private social media platform that you put your fingerprint in and they identify if you black or not, and
Right.
you know what I mean, or if you are an ally or not, you know so we just have to tread that careful line of making sure that our silence isn't deadly and we're not speaking on these issues at all in support of the people who are fighting, but also make sure that we're not so loose tongued that we say something out of pocket,
Right.
right? So it's like, somebody looking in and saying something like, black people in America should just comply with the police. You know what I mean? That's out of pocket
Exactly.
because you don't know the whole story. And so you're
Exactly.
just saying something. So, before I put myself in a position like that, I always, and I do deep dive. I need historical context. I need current present day context. I need to
Hmm.
know how it all fits together. I need to know political oppositions. I need to know, who is vetting the stories, who, because sometimes it can be where, like, for example, like Cubans, there are Cubans who loved Fidel Castro, there are Cubans
Right.
who hated Fidel Castro.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so it all depended on their economic status, on, a lot of it had to do with skin complexion. A lot of the lighter skinned, whiter Cubans weren't in favor of Castro.
Hmm.
And so, a lot of those things come into play on who's telling the story and what their angle is, what is their
Right.
agenda. So understanding all the agendas and what the sides are and trying to figure out, okay, where is the truth and what is being said on either side. So
Right.
I'm just very careful. And so I always defer to the people from a place, and I open up platforms to have people from different places to speak on behalf of where they come from,
Hmm.
right? I believe in African unity, but I wanted people to always understand that when we say African unity, we don't mean an amalgamation of one type of being. We are talking about embracing our differences as people of African descent and learning from that. Just like we were talking about yesterday, we need different people with different skill sets. So I don't want you to lose your your Yoruba aspects. I don't want you to lose your Mandinka aspects. I don't want you to lose your Zulu aspects. I want you to bring those things to the table so we can learn from the, the spiritual paths that were developed over time, and the way that you guys see certain elements of, time and space, or whatever it is, education. These things are important. And even speaking to your earlier point of Europeans, we still use a lot of their systems. We are educated in the system of the people who oppressed us. So the people who are getting into these positions of power, of authority, who are the most highly educated in Africa, in the Caribbean, in the US, it's based around a system of either France, England, or the US, the culprits of who, are subjugating us in the first place.
Right.
So, how do we imagine that we can break free if we are basing our intelligence on what they are deeming is the knowledge that we need to know to be successful?
Right. Even, I mean, even in examples like that just blow me away, or like even in their courts, some of them still wear like those blonde wigs. It's like that's something that's like you gotta get rid of that. Like why? I don't get the point of like holding on to different, even just the symbol, like
The Europeans don't even hold on to that.
right.
And it's ridiculousness. And but it goes to Carter G. Woodson's point about the miseducation of the Negro is more damaging than the lack of education.
Mm,
When you, because the thing is, if you don't know something, you will easily accept information because you don't know. If a
right.
mechanic is talking to me about my car and trying to teach me certain things about my engine, I'm not gonna be sitting there with my mouth cocked to the side like you don't know what you're talking about, or I know better than you.
Right.
But if I have been educated in mechanics but incorrectly, I will fight against them saying I do know, right? Even though I'm wrong, my education level has told me I've been rewarded over and
Right.
over again based on the wrong information that I know. This is what happens when there are people who have PhDs and still believe certain things that, certain parts of eugenics. There are people with, you know, terminal degrees, high degrees that know nothing of African history, African influence on the world because their education did not deem it important. So when you try to give that highly educated person new information, they're going to reject it because they've been told over and over again and rewarded with the miseducation that they have.
And now
So
they have credentials to say, look, I know this. I'm an
exactly.
expert in this. But really, you can really know nothing, like not the truth. You know what you were taught. And like you said, were rewarded on, for knowing, but that doesn't, like just trump like actual truth, knowledge,
Right.
like world knowledge and everything. You can be called an expert in whatever area that you studied in, but that doesn't make it, you know, um, all right. I remember even I was interested in studying holistic medicine, like while I was in school. I was considering like as a major, and like the closest programs like they had was, in like as far as like with the nutrition classes, they were following like the food pyramid, which I already knew was not, like it doesn't fit everybody. I knew for a fact that it wasn't good for me and for like, for everybody. Like we don't all follow the same diet, um, And I don't know, I remember looking at that curriculum and I was like, if I become an expert in this, I'm still not learning what I need to know. So I can have a degree in something, but I would still have to go out and get my own like education to find out the truth.
Because it just started coming out that the food pyramid is paid for by lobbyists.
Exactly.
So
Like to get us to drink milk and all of these different
and
things. Like
dairy
it's
and
not even based like really on like true health and nutrition. It's based on who's paying the most to
they
get to
needed
say, hey, drink this, eat this.
America needed their farmers to make money, and they
Mhm.
needed, these grocery stores and these schools to
Mhm.
serve these items, not only to teach it, but to serve it. Like, why is milk the drink of choice with school lunch? Milk
Right.
as a drink option does
With
not
any
go with every meal. It's just
with
ridiculous.
any
It doesn't even make sense.
I
Who is
almost
at their table at home or at a restaurant drinking milk with
no,
like
but people
steak?
do it. Bro, this is the craziest thing. Even to this day, it was a movie I watched not that long ago. And people are literally doing it. Like they
Yeah, of
really
course,
took
in
it
the
to
movie,
heart.
just like
No,
on
but
Leave It to
not just
Beaver.
in the movie. Like there are people that I met and that's like they live by it. And like I used to like milk when I was younger, and they said it was healthy and stuff. But I think, when you can adapt to things like to the taste of things because it's good for you, like how I do now, with eating certain vegetables or herbal remedies or something like that, I can develop a taste for it like good enough to be like, okay, well, I know it's good for me. It may not be the most delicious thing, but over time I can trick myself into believing that it's just so delicious that I'll actually
Mhm.
want it. So I think that it happened with people when it comes to things like they say is good for you, like milk. And I know people who will literally sit there and drink milk like with their dinner. I've seen people order it at like restaurants. Like they really feel, believing in it. Like, oh, they said, we need 2 glasses of milk a day or something, whatever they recommended.
That's
People really
crazy.
believe it.
But I do believe that, media has an influence on what people do. Because, like, even the shows back in the day, like Leave It to Beaver, they all were drinking milk and the milkman would come by. But
Right.
I mean, it goes to your point that miseducation, if you would have got educated on that, you would have been miseducating an entirely new population of people under your wing or under your guidance to do the
Exactly.
wrong thing with their body. And it's
Right.
like, one thing I like about psychology PhD programs is they don't allow, or they'll accept you if you have a master's in psychology, but they would rather you come in straight off of your bachelor's degree. Because if you come in with a master's and you are studying under a different school of thought in psychology, then you'll be spending your time in your PhD coursework challenging them the entire time.
Right.
And they're like, oh, look, we don't have time for that. We want you to come in and just accept our school of thought so that we can, keep it moving and keep everybody on the same page. Because if you come in thinking you already know something, you're going to throw off the rhythm of everybody else. And those different schools of thought have, impact on the way that you practice, the way that you look at certain things. Just like when I was doing psychology at Howard, it was more about, people. When I did psychology at Georgia State, it was more about quantitative numbers, statistics. At Howard is more qualitative, more about the actual interpersonal connection between, that individual. So if you are, brought up in the qualitative and then you go into a quantitative PhD, you're going to be lost. First of all, you're going to have to relearn everything that you thought you knew, and it is going to take you a lot longer. So the same thing with miseducating people, we have to unteach all the bad and then reteach good. So you're doing double work, right?
Exactly.
And so it's better that's why we focus so much on youth in the work that we do, is because
Mm-hmm.
when you catch them young, they're thirsty for knowledge and
Right.
they know they're not in a position to say, I know better than, right?
Right.
And so, and they're not so set in their ways that they are not willing to change, because there are older people who will also admit, I don't know this information,
Mm-hmm.
but are not flexible enough or willing enough to say, I am going to learn new things at
Right.
this, advanced of an age. So I've been
And we got
doing like this for all my life. I'm just going to keep doing it.
right. I mean, we got to be realistic when it comes to trying to get people to unlearn and then relearn things, because it's almost like a is it like a muscle? I'm trying to think of, like, because it's already been worked out, it's already like tense and, like,
Yeah, like muscle
not really
memory.
willing.
You just automatically do it. Like sometimes when you're
Exactly.
driving home, you don't even realize that you're turning down the street. You be like, how did I get here? You just
Mm-hmm.
automatically do it. You make the turns, you go certain places. And sometimes I pull in my driveway. I have no idea how I got
Right.
there. Like
And
my
then
brain just kind of shut
even
off.
yeah, but even as adults, like as we're growing up, like that age becomes like that certificate or that degree, like
Right.
that it's
Yep.
supposed to be, I've earned this wisdom. I've gotten here because of what I know, and we're looking at it like a reward. Um, because, like, well, it worked for me up to this point, but we adjust. It's like we constantly adjust to things, but that doesn't make it right. Like, I feel the same way when it comes to like traditions and stuff. All traditions are not good traditions. Sometimes we just repeat things, out of habit, out of, this is what so and so said, this is what I'm expected to do, and this is what I'll continue to do. And, like you, I prefer to work with children when it comes to that. It's just so much easier, even if they have to still go through the system, that wasn't designed by us, not taught by us. It'll be easier for children to learn at the same time, right? Like we can teach them right, even when they're, in the system that's like contradictory to, the things that we want them to learn and know.
On the conversation about tradition, that
Mm.
is a tricky one, because we see a lot of traditions being passed on just simply out of respect for, those who came before you, not ever questioning, were they misguided or were they
Right.
wrong? And it takes, just like we were talking about, it's going to take um not condoning the behavior, but also not condemning the entire thing, right? So a lot of traditions are tied to culture, a lot of traditions are tied to religion, a lot of traditions are tied to family. And these are things that people hold on to very tightly and personally, and almost, link their identity to,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you challenge these things, you have to come at it with like a high degree of cultural sensitivity. Just like in certain parts of Africa, the excision, the circumcision of women, right? They have slowly started to back away from that, but it took years of, you can't just come in and say that they're wrong,
Right.
because they're going to shut you down and they're going to take it as a personal attack on them and their family and the people who taught them.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to start to really show respect for the culture, respect for tradition as a whole, maybe not
Right.
this specific tradition, but show a respect for traditions, a respect for ancestors, a respect for what it is that they hold dear, and then start to show just based on facts and figures of how this is hurting people, and that,
Right.
we hold on to these traditions and these, cultural significant practices based on a love and a care for the people, and to show that this is harming the people. Hopefully that can start to reel back some of these behaviors and some of these attitudes.
Hmm.
So it's the same thing with this whole conversation where we're talking about not condoning but also not condemning. It takes a very high degree of sensitivity. Even when we were talking about just yesterday with the gangs, you can't just go into the gang culture and say, stop, what you're doing is wrong. They're
Right.
going to not listen to that and ignore you. It's not going to
Exactly.
reach the people. And we have to be solution oriented. And solution oriented isn't just about coming up with ways to solve a problem. It's like, is my approach going to bring about the result that I want? If you don't approach it the right way, you're going to, like a math problem, right? There is an order of operations. You do parentheses, then you do exponents, and then you do multiplication, division. No,
Yeah.
whatever it is. I think it's multiplication, division, then addition and subtraction, right? So if you start off with the exponent and then you do the parentheses, the answer is going to be wrong. You
Right.
started off wrong.
Right.
So even when we're talking about these social issues, and there's an order of operations, you have to respect where these people are coming from in order for them to listen to you.
Right. And then
Because if you
also considering stuff like, are we interested in just tearing down what they already practice or what they learned? Or are we going to fill it in with something else? Are we replacing it? Are we taking something away in order to replace it to say, hey, are we suggesting that, like, hey, this might be better, with this information that we now have, this might be a better solution. I think, well, I find, like, a lot of times when we talk about situations like with a lot of countries and stuff that, that we're seeing these problems with throughout in the Caribbean, on the continent of Africa and things like that. And we see a lot of things are going bad. They already didn't have like their own foundation. Like you talked about before, like they picked up where the colonizers, just organized that for them, and that was a solution. That was their crime bill. They was like, hey, let me give you something. They didn't have that opportunity to create it for themselves. But when it comes to different things, like things that we can relate to, I think most of us can relate to when it comes to dealing with, especially older generations, and not understanding how a lot of behaviors, a lot of different things were harmful to people. It was that we didn't have the right words or explanations. The research didn't come out yet about how, you know uh, beatings will, can destroy you as an adult. You don't notice these things until these case studies have been done, and this takes time. So we didn't know how harmful it was back then. Like, yeah, you lived through it. Yeah, you turned out all right, but are you really all right? Like, now we have more information and you have to adjust. And a lot of times I think it's hard for people to adjust to the idea of something new, because they're like, well, my mom and dad did it, their mom and dad did it. So you calling them wrong, you saying that they're wrong. And like you said, people do take offense to that. Like, they will be offended and reject whatever you have to say, because it's like, well, how are you going to call everything and everybody I love wrong? You're not coming up with something better. You're not giving me like the scientific the data to show me that. hey,
Mm.
this, it has this effect. We just have to be careful when critiquing these situations, even when we see them.
Because there's two options, right? You're telling people that either the people that taught them were not intelligent,
Right.
or you're telling them that the people who taught them lied to them.
Right.
No positive outcome on either side of that. Either the people that I trusted the most in the world weren't as, smart and gifted as I thought they were, which means what does that mean for me? Or the people that I trusted the most in the world lied to me. And now the fabric of my reality is, shaken. This is the same thing that happens to people who grow up racist.
Hmm.
And it's hard to break away from it because you're presenting them with new correct information, but they have to be faced with the reality that either they've been lied to their entire lives, or the people who taught them their entire lives are not that smart. And it's very hard to accept because you look up to your the people who raised you.
Right.
And that's definitely something that, you know, like I said, it's just a high degree of cultural sensitivity, even when you're talking about all these different all these elements. So when we talk about not condoning behavior and not condemning people, it extends, you know, beyond so many different aspects of life. But, you know, we just have to learn how to do these things. I think one of the solutions we talked about last week, especially when it comes to the African diaspora, is just looking at the ways that we have approached unity across the African diaspora in the past. I say the apartheid play. I always go back to the influence of America's fight for freedom, Black Americans' fight for freedom on the independence movement in Africa. These were moments, right? And they stayed moments. But the whole reason behind the creation of African Unity Initiative is to make those moments into sustainable movements, something that can last beyond just one generation or one, particular incident. How do we make sure that if we're talking about police brutality in the United States, we make sure that we add in SARS into that whole conversation?
Right.
Let's make sure that when we talk about violence in our communities and gang culture, we talk about the violence that's happening in Mali, or any violence that may be happening across the continent or in any other places. Like, we address it all at once, where it's not like, one of the impressive things about the apartheid play is that African Americans did not say, let us hold on for a moment. Let us finish our fight with America and then we'll help you out. They kept the fight going on with America and assisted in the fight against apartheid. We were
Right.
able to chew bubblegum and walk. We can multitask. And it's not really even that big of a multitask because we're linking similar issues with each other. Police brutality is police brutality, no matter where it's taking place. So if you're against it, you're just against it. Violence against, our own people, and not wanting to, advocate or stand by while black on black crime is happening, is the same thing whether it's happening in Cameroon, Nigeria, Jamaica, Haiti, or Chicago. So these things can be, coalesced. And it's not like you you ignore the local problem. If you're in Chicago, if you're in Atlanta, if you're in LA and you're fighting against street violence, keep doing what you're doing, but then also extend yourself to know what's happening in other places and work with them, because this is what can happen. You can learn from a solution that, people fighting against violence in Haiti, they implemented this program. Oh, wow, that's a good idea. Maybe that can be translated to my community. You get to exchange ideas. You get to do a lot more.
Yeah, and that way everybody is not starting from square one.
Exactly. And these are just, small little tidbits of how African unity can actually happen. So when we talk about the work of the organization African Unity Initiatives, one of the things that we do is called the Bringing the Neighbor Back to the Hood campaign. And it's about taking individual communities. So Atlanta, um, Cap-Haïtien in Haiti, Beau Sierra Leone, um, Lima in Peru, Sigiri in Guinea. They all have their own separate projects that they're working on that they came up with in their own community assessment meetings. We as an organization help them raise funds, but then that is their individual community. That's what they're building. But then we start to connect those communities to one another so that they get exposed to one another. They're inspired to keep going because they know there are other people that are fighting.
Right.
Then on top of that, they're inspired because now they have the support of so many other people. They get to share ideas. They get to vent to one another of how difficult it is, because they are acknowledging that they're carrying a beautiful burden. So now they have somebody in the fight to actually talk to. It's it as a married person, it's difficult to try to have a conversation about some of the struggles of marriage with somebody that's single. They're not in it. They don't know. So the same thing as somebody who is communally engaged trying to have a conversation with somebody who isn't is a little difficult. And it may wear down on that person, but if you know that all of us are in this together, you understand the struggle. You understand how difficult it may be to get volunteers, how difficult it may be to get consistent, communication and help, and for people to, engage on a consistent level. You understand it. So you can offer solutions or just offer a ear that's willing to just hear and let the person get it off their chest and be like, I completely understand. And it be the truth. You understand because you go through it as well. And so sometimes all you need to do is just hear yourself say stuff out loud, and then you're refreshed and you're back ready to go. So the solutions of, being culturally sensitive to people, not condoning the behavior, but not condemning the person, is something that is going to help us in this fight for sustainability. We've seen so many moments of powerful collaborations throughout our history. We've seen so many moments of inspiration, but now it's time to, string those moments together and like make a long lasting imprint and impact on the people that we are, influencing. Any last words? Today was a short show. It was going to be a short show. We'll go back into more details tomorrow, and we'll make sure, that we highlight somebody, and we may even open the stage up for people to hop on and share their thoughts. And, you know, if you have an organization or if you're doing any work, the platform will be open for you to share those things as well.
Definitely.
Michelee, share any closing thoughts that you have.
Yeah, I mean, just what you were saying, last, it just had me thinking about the idea, when we talked about it a little bit yesterday too, about how people can say like, well, you don't care about what's going on here. You don't care about black on black violence and whatever city that you reside in. We only notice it when it's other people, against us. So it just really makes me think about like when we talk about condemning and well condoning and condemning things, you have to think about like what your intentions are, or like where your heart is, your heart and head is with these issues. Is it something that you're genuinely concerned about and like really want to find solutions to? Because I think, if you don't really care, you don't feel really connected to it, then you would just criticize with no, you don't really even have a solution in mind. And so I think we just have to be mindful about when we are critiquing, because again, like you said, like these our opinions and our thoughts and stuff are being shared for the world to see. And we just really have to just be mindful about how we are just showing just our like the faith that we have in each other, in ourselves, for that matter, in handling these situations. So I think, it just makes me think about like, just people's opinions being shared, and a lot of times it's negative because we don't have the understanding and the knowledge of what's really going on, and maybe some people's hearts are not in it enough. We're not invested in it to care to get to the bottom of it. So let's make sure that we're not just looking at it and just criticizing like anybody else that's outside the situation. Just think
Right.
about it as a person, that's caring about finding solutions. But that's all I have to say. So you can find me on at Mishmash World on Instagram and mishmashworld.com on the website. And that's where you can see and support me, what I'm doing.
We appreciate that. Please do support that Black owned business.
I
Um,
appreciate holidays coming up,
handmade materials,
Exactly.
quality materials.
I appreciate
Um,
that.
if you guys want to get involved with African Unity Initiative, you can definitely follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all at African Unity. You can also, subscribe to this YouTube channel. You can type in at African Unity in the search bar, and the channel will pop right up. Or if you want to get more involved, you can go to africanunity.us, become a supporter financially, in your volunteer work, in ideas. We are open to all types of collaborations because I believe that that is the way forward. That is the sustainable model for us to carry on our significant impact. Please like, comment, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Share these videos with more people. The more people that we have watching, the more we move up the algorithm, the more support we can garner, and the more outreach we, can do. And we are really about doing work. African Unity is something that I truly believe is real. It's tangible. It's something that we can touch. It's something that we can do. And so all we have to do is make sure that we believe that first. And then when we actually want to, you know, do things, more people will have the buy-in to believe that it's actually possible. So
Right.
once again, we appreciate you guys for watching. We love you. Peace.